Greetings and welcome to the latest edition of the Entheogenic Evolution podcast. As always, I am your host, Martin, and I'm happy to have you with me today. For this week's episode, I am joined by husband and wife power couple team, Stephan and Amber Kerby. They have joined me here on the podcast to discuss their latest book that they co-wrote together called The Embodiment Protocol, a practical guide to awakening with 5-MeO DMT. Anyone who's a regular listener of the podcast will recognize the name Stephan Kerby. He is the director of the Mindscape Psychedelic Institute, where I help teach the 5-MeO DMT facilitation course and also my 5-MeO DMT integration specialist training course. Stephan has been a guest on the podcast numerous times so far, and this is actually my first conversation with Amber here on the podcast. So we give a special highlight to Amber and welcoming her onto the podcast and inviting her to share her story as someone who came into therapeutic work with psychedelic medicines out of a professional therapeutic background, what got her interested in it, how she got involved, and how she and Stephan created this new book together. We'll be getting to that in just a minute, but of course, first a few announcements. First off, I want to thank Ian, who has joined up as a new supporter over at my Patreon page. That is patreon.com/MartinWBall. As I do, mentioning it every week, it's a great way to support the podcast and to get something back in return. There's everything from $1 a month up to $100 a month that comes with a monthly 1-hour video call, check-in, and consultation with me. There's no obligation. You can change your support level at any time, and all support tiers of $20 and above get access to the Entheogenic Evolution Archive, where there are literally hundreds of hours of back material from the podcast that's no longer active here. So there's talks, there's interviews, there's lectures, all kinds of stuff. Everyone who joins at the $20 a month level and up gets access to all of that. Let's see. My next big announcement, I am excited to officially announce that the 5-MeO DMT Glossary is now released and out there in the world. This is just a project that I started working on for my students at the Mindscape Institute and decided that it became rather lengthy and informative, and it was a lot of fun to work on, and so why not release it as basically a booklet. I created some really beautiful art to go with it, so it is a visually captivating piece. It's only about 62 pages long, but it's available in paperback in full color print, which makes it a little bit more expensive for the length of the book. But that's available in paperback over there at Amazon. Also, it's available as a Kindle ebook, and it's out there on Audible as an audiobook. It's, only a few hours long because it's not a long project, which allowed me to do the audiobook fairly quickly and easily. And they've got even some of my new music is featured in that audiobook, and it's also available as a full-color PDF that is available at my Patreon shop, where I have many of my books available in PDF format. And for those that have art inside them, they're available in full-color PDF format over there at patreon.com/MartinWBall. Music, I mentioned music, didn't I? Yeah, that's right. So every year, around my birthday, which is coming up this week, I like to take one of my albums over there at my Bandcamp page, martinball.bandcamp.com, and make it available for free download during the week of my birthday. This week, I have chosen my brand new album, which is entitled Solar Return. It has 10 new tracks by me. It's 55 minutes worth of music, and it's currently available for free download as a reverse birthday gift from me to whoever wants to receive it. Of course, the advantage of downloading an album is that then you have it wherever you go. You don't need to be online. You don't need to have cell service. You're not streaming it. You actually have it, and you can use it as you like. If you would like to receive this free musical gift from me to you, just go to martinball.bandcamp.com. And when you go to purchase Solar Return, all you need to do is enter 0 when it prompts you for payment. I have it currently set to 0, but that means that people can pay if they want to pay, but there's no required fee, so you can just enter 0 and it's all yours. It's all yours. I'll be putting one of those new tracks at the outro for this podcast episode as I normally do. And as I mentioned, the new music is also featured in the new audiobook, the 5-MeO DMT Glossary. Speaking of 5-MeO DMT, I do want to thank the Church of the Sacred Synthesis for hosting me for a talk with their members this past week. We had a few transmission issues from internet problems with Spectrum that just happened to show up right when we were having our talk. But I just want to thank the church for inviting me to come speak with their membership. It was a great opportunity to speak about 5-MeO DMT for about an hour. And just for anybody listening, if you would like me to speak with your local group, awesome. I'm pretty much always available. It's something I'm always happy to do. We can set up a Zoom call or however you like to arrange it. And I'm more than happy to speak with your local community and group and discuss 5-MeO DMT, psychedelics, therapy, non-duality, whatever you want. Always open. And lastly, speaking of all that stuff, yes, as always, I'm available for 30, 60, or 90-minute integration calls to help you integrate your entheogenic experience from a non-dual and energetic perspective. I specialize in 5-MeO DMT, but I'm not limited to that in any way, shape, or form. And I'm happy to talk to you about any of your psychedelic experiences. You can stop by at www.nondualentheogenicintegration.com or just martinball.net, or just shoot me an email at martinwball@gmail.com. And also, as I mentioned last week, Piazza Nekosif is offering a women's retreat with 5-MeO DMT. This is for women survivors of sexual trauma. This is going to be happening February 24th through March 1st of 2026 and is taking place in Mexico. You can stop by at evolutionaryactivation.com to register or get more information from Piazza. You may remember that Piazza was featured here on the podcast for her spoken word piece about her 5-MeO DMT experience. That was quite a few months ago, but Piazza is involved in offering retreats working with 5-MeO DMT for women, and this one, of course, as I mentioned, is for women survivors of sexual trauma. Again, that's evolutionaryactivation.com. Well, let's go ahead and get into that interview with Stephan and Amber Kerby talking about their new book, The Embodiment Protocol. It is out there and available. It is in paperback and also ebook, and it features a foreword written by myself and also a cover designed by me, because that's something that I like to do, is use art and make stuff. All right, let's go ahead and get into it, and stay tuned after the interview for one of the new tracks off my album Solar Return, which you can download for free this week as my reverse birthday gift from me to you. Happy holidays, everyone. Be back next week with a couple more chapters from The Alchemist and the Eagle audiobook. All right. Well, I am just super excited to have on the podcast today both Stephan Kerby and Amber Kerby, and we're going to be talking about their new book, The Embodiment Protocol, A Practical Guide to Awakening with 5-MeO DMT. And as I just let them know right before I hit the record button that we're going to be coming for Amber first. So here's my logic here, guys. Kerby, you've been on the podcast a million bazillion times. You and I, we've done a number of interviews together. All of my listeners know who you are. And we've talked about Amber every once in a while, every now and again. But now we've got her here. And so I want to start with Amber. But first, let's just start with both you guys. Welcome to the show. And I see you got a new microphone there. So congratulations on that. But thanks for being on the podcast with me today.
Thank you.
Yes. Thanks, Martin. Thanks for having us. Thanks for picking on me first.
Yeah. Well, you are a co-author of the book. And so I really wanted to make sure that you were here in the conversation, that it wasn't just me and Kerby, doing guy stuff, and have you here for this. But Amber, I'd really like to start with you, where I generally like to start when I have a new guest on the podcast, and just inviting you to share of your background, your experience, and what brought you into the world of psychedelic medicines. And then we're going to get into your role at Mindscape and the classes that you teach there. And then we'll eventually get to the book. But I want to let the listening audience hear from you first. Okay?
All right. Those are big questions.
Yeah.
So to break it down, what brought me here to this space, honestly, was Kerby. It was was really in watching his work with medicines and transformations and just the shifts that he was making. It definitely piqued my curiosity as a therapist, seeing some alternative treatment going on at the time.
Okay. So I got to stop you right there. So you were already involved in the therapeutic world. So tell us a little bit about that.
Yeah. So I've been a licensed therapist for over 10 years, and primarily practicing in the traditional ways. So it really wasn't until about 5 years ago that my entire practice changed, due to the work and the experiences with psychedelics, and also with additional training in internal family systems, which is essentially parts work, but it goes hand in hand with so much that happens in the non-ordinary therapy space. So I was coming from this more traditional background, understanding right and wrong, black and white, and then seeing my husband engage in medicines that were clearly impactful. And it really brought me personally to a stage where I knew that if we wanted to continue building a life together, I also needed to dig in and do some of my own work. And so that brought my personal work, which of course is going to impact everything else that I do. And that's what really prompted the entire shift that we've made as a family and also in my professional life.
Okay. So there's a couple things I'm going to want to follow up with you on from what you shared there. So This is a topic that Kerby has discussed with me here on the podcast, and we've talked about kind of his own personal transformation and why he went to the medicines. And this is also included in the new book that you guys have put out there. And so for you, I would just like to get, if you're willing to share, I mean, not forcing you to do anything, but from an outside perspective, I think it'd be very useful to kind of hear, okay, well, this was the inside perspective of what Kerby felt he was going through, but from the outside, what did you observe? And then I'm really curious about this comment that you made about how if we were to build a life together, I needed some understanding of this. Because I think that, we probably all deal with couples a lot. And usually each side of the couple is in a different trajectory, in a different place in their own healing journey. So what was that for you from the outside?
Yeah. Well, from the outside, my perspective was very limited, even though I was trying to remain open. I mean, I grew up with the generation heavily influenced with DARE, so drugs are bad. I remember being really caught off guard when Oregon began passing their legislation regarding psychedelics and therapy. And my initial thought was like, this is a bad idea. What are we doing here with this? And so I was hesitant, but yet open. Obviously, we're going through some really hard things at the time, and this was almost last ditch. Like, something's got to work. And so what I really began seeing was primarily a change in communication. I think that was really the first thing that I noticed. The energy between how we would communicate about things that maybe would have ended up typically in an argument or a shutdown. We were able to hold that space for a lot longer than we used to be able to. So seeing that happen, also really watching Kerby manage his own personal work. So maybe some moods or disappointments or conflict with others in a way that he didn't manage before. And then, of course, one of his greatest skills is verbal processing. So he was also letting me know step by step, this is what's going on for me. This is what I'm thinking. This is the old pattern. And this is the new pattern that I'm working on. So I really did get to kind of take a peek inside his own process and watch him do and change things in a way that, I think too, initially I was like, we'll see. Cause we've gone through these like, yeah, this is different. I feel better. I'm like, great, for like 2 months. And then we'll see how this really hits. And then it was sustained, and it kept getting better. And some of our conversations, so to kind of move into this idea of like, what life did I want to build? We began talking about some really core issues around beliefs and values and what we want as a couple, what we want as a family. And as he began shifting and really expanding, I knew that my narrow set wasn't going to jive with what he had going on. And yet the things he was talking about, I think there was also a part of me that knew, like, he's on to it. This is something that could be really different and really good. And so I also need to be able to dig into what's holding me back, my own belief system and my own structure around what I think people should be doing in this world, how we should be showing up, what are all my shoulds? Can I get enough space from that and really realize how much awareness and choice is available in those moments so that we can actually build this life together in the way that we want it?
Okay. Well, thank you for sharing all of that, Amber. And I'm going to come back to you because I got more questions. I still want to hear from you. But at this point, I do want to invite Kerby to join in the conversation and maybe just remind the listeners again kind of what your story was and why you went to psychedelics as a transformative tool for yourself and as a therapeutic modality. And then I'm curious if you have any comments from what Amber has shared from her exterior perspective, particularly around your communication skills and your self-awareness and how you were able to shift that.
Yeah, I think that was beautifully articulated. It's interesting, and I'm kind of curious about your perspective. I think about this a lot, and that's what kind of led to the protocol. I'm not jumping ahead, but it was, how did these experiences actually change me? Not the medicine, but like happening afterwards. What was the process of taking whatever insight or information I have and then work with it? And sometimes it's difficult to look back and remember, like, where was I? But like, we have a small hole in our wall downstairs where I lost my cool once when I was alone and threw like a printer down the hall. Right. So it's like, it hasn't been repaired, but every time I see it, it's a reminder of like how far I came. I was never abusive or anything like that. I just was so frustrated and so trapped in this identity of who I thought I was. And I had tried some traditional therapy, on and off. I'd taken, antidepressants for a small period of time. I had tried several different things, but it just wasn't working. And so it really was, like she said, a last ditch effort. I just was like, even my first 5 experience, I remember I didn't even go for 5, which I've shared this story before. I went for like N-dimethyltryptamine. They didn't have it. And I was like, I'd rather die here in the grass than go home being the person I've been. And I remember that very distinctly. So it's also gave me this recognition that when people come to us, sometimes they're in a place of desperation, like I was.
Yeah.
So it allowed me to see all this old programming, like a perfect example when it really dawned on me once. I was sitting in the backyard. It was a couple days after a light experience. And I'm like, people used to tell me all the time, you should love yourself. You just love yourself.
Yeah.
Love yourself. And that used to just grate on me, right? Like, I'm like, how can I love myself when I'm an asshole, right? Or I'm angry, or I'm frustrated, or I'm making these bad decisions, whatever it may be. So it made me crazy. And then I had this realization of like, oh, okay, you are just an accumulation of all these thoughts, emotions, and feelings and experiences that you've had over the years to create this identity of Kerby, right? And you're just playing out that program. And in that moment, there was a detachment from that, like a witness to that. And it was like, oh, okay, if everything in my life has led to this person that I am now, if I made different choices and had different thoughts, emotions, and feelings, I could lead myself to a different person, right? So it was just the witness to the ego, the program, whatever you want to call it. And it was just clear as day. And I'm like, okay, you can love yourself now because you've been doing exactly what you've been programmed to do, right? Now, though, you have some level of awareness, some level of consciousness where you now get to respond to reality more so than the way you've been reacting to reality. We just need to slow down and hear some of the kind of practices that we need to do to really dial that in. And that was the beginning of just a lot of self-awareness and recognition of, things. Again, you probably remember sitting on the front porch one day and I'm like, oh my gosh, I've been living in fear my whole life, right? Like just this I'm a big frame. I studied martial arts. I lived in a very dangerous, hostile environment, as well as home was a hostile environment. So I created this identity, this character of like threats are everywhere, right? So I was constantly in this fight or flight mode, but fight mode. And it was this, again, this dawning of like, oh my gosh, it's because you've been scared your whole life, and being able to admit that and feel that. And again, just some awareness around that. And again, I just felt it like, it's like this, like just this huge load off my back of like, there's no threat here right now. How about now? How about now? Right.
Yeah.
So to me, it was just this unwinding of this identity or this program that I had created by all my thoughts, emotions, and feelings and experiences.
Yeah. Well, this is so rich to have both of you here. I'm really glad that we're having this conversation. And I think it can make it really illustrative for people to help to understand like what this process is, and then how it can be appreciated from both the inside and from the outside, and how you are both going through your own process, but you're going through it together and in partnership, and with the idea of we are seeking to support ourselves and support the partnership as well. So Amber, I want to come back to you, and thank you for sharing, Kerby. Really appreciate that. And I'll give you more airtime shortly. But Amber, and this will be for both of you ultimately. Now, I see the heart of this work is that question of, do I love myself? And even, do I know how to love myself? Do I even know what that means? And then how do I sustain that? And then use that as my baseline for all the ways that I think about myself and live my life. So I'm curious for you both, Amber, at the inside and the outside. I'm curious for you, where were you on that scale of do I love myself prior to going through this work with the medicines? And then also, what was your experience and perception of Kerby shifting more into out of the anger and reactive and even the sense of disbelief? There's how am I supposed to love myself when I'm an asshole? This statement that you made, Kerby. How did you see that changing? And also, not just see it, but how did that feel to you?
Mm-hmm. Yeah, I think that was a hard topic for me to even wrap my head around as well. I don't think I necessarily hated myself, so to speak, before, but I really don't think I knew myself. I was definitely much more anxious than I ever thought I was. I thought it was really normal. Like, oh, I'm perfectly normal. This is kind of how you go throughout life. And then just through some of my own work, it was a big awareness factor of like, holy smokes, there is so much that I'm doing and saying and trying to be out of anxiety and fear and wanting to like belong somewhere and meet these shoulds, these standards, be perfect at these roles. So I also had to do my own work of landing in a place of really understanding more about who I am and who I'm not and what I can be, and loving that whole idea as a system as well. And so, seeing Kerby do that shift, I think it was probably most noticeable in the way that it rippled out, because when he really loved and accepted who he was and who he is and where he came from, that also meant that I got a lot of love and acceptance, like true love, compassion, acceptance, very open to hearing more about my story and the things that I was discovering about myself. And also seeing how he was interacting with our daughter was just completely different. The fear level really subsided, much more openness and curiosity and playfulness was happening. So, as he was peeling away his own layers, he was really able to hold more space for my layers and for her layers as well.
I really love that you added in about the relationship with your daughter. Because I think within the psychedelic world, there's a lot of the sort of the lone wolf archetype, the idea like I'm exploring the infinite all on my own. But I think many of us, in the contemporary, especially more on the therapeutic side of things, see a lot of families and a lot of people in relationship. And that's where people want to make changes. They want to have better lives with their kids. They want to have better relationships with their partners and spouses. So I think something that's quite interesting, of course, is that you were a therapist prior to moving into the work in psychedelic therapy. And I think even there, you're kind of indicative of where we are in terms of, the cultural zeitgeist. I think we would probably all say that we're seeing more and more therapists like in the classes and coming for integration and coming for facilitation and things like that. And a lot of them are people who said, like, it never even crossed my mind. But then I start hearing these reports about, oh, that person's making profound changes. So it's not only a personal hurdle to move into this space, but also a professional hurdle. So I'm curious if you have anything more that you would want to share about that transition from, quote, traditional therapist into psychedelic therapist.
All right. Before she gets into that, I want to put something in your brain, and then since we just saw your glossary of terms, one that I've been sitting with that we've mentioned twice in this conversation, and because I'm in school for therapy right now, I'm pushing the edges of my teachers a little bit with these types of questions. Like, one is traditional therapy, right? I don't believe it is traditional therapy. It's 130 years old. Freud laying on the couch, talking about your thoughts, emotions, and feelings, right? Writing it down, psychoanalysis. That's so new, right? And so to me, it's traditional to the institutions. But real traditional therapy is the work that you were doing, and then that we are doing now. That's tens of thousands of years old. Community, drum circles, sweat lodges, altered states in a community kind of environment, peyote, ayahuasca, so whatever it may be. That to me is like the traditional therapy before we had to like do psychoanalysis and the DSM and all this new therapy. So I haven't come up with a term necessarily for the new therapy, but I don't consider what's happening now traditional therapy. I think it's still an experiment of more modern therapy.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, I think modern therapy, or even like I call it ordinary therapy, because my company is non-ordinary therapy. So it's kind of how I'm trying to differentiate the two.
Yeah, like it's traditional to the institutions,
Yes.
And psychedelic therapy is, or just the therapies that I outlined, is traditional to humanity in my mind. Yeah. But anyhow, please continue.
No, I think that's a great reversal, because it does highlight the fact that modern, I was about to say traditional again, but psychotherapy, talk therapy, psychoanalysis, that's relatively new in the human experience. And it's this interesting question, is like, how long does something need to exist before it's considered traditional? Like, if we were to use the same time frame, for example, the Native American church has only been around for about that long as a church. And there, once we hit maybe even it's a second generation, maybe by that point, things become traditional. Where,
interesting.
Okay, we've been using peyote now for the past generation. Or another example of that I would point out is where toad secretions was introduced to the Seri people of Mexico by Octavio Redig. They had no prior history of use of 5-MeO or toad secretions, but they've been doing it for about the past 20 years now. So at this point, it is considered part of their tradition. It's been incorporated into that. So it's this curious question of how long does something need to exist before it is, quote, traditional?
Yeah.
And if we take the long view of history, I'm totally on board with you. Like, yeah, let's just flip it around. That people have been using entheogenic plants and fungi and substances for way longer than being sitting on a couch talking to a therapist about their mother. So maybe that is the traditional therapy. But of course, it was just termed as spirituality or religion or even just culture, right? That a lot of these indigenous cultures, I'm putting on my religious studies PhD hat. A lot of them don't even have a word for religion or spirituality, that it's our way. That's how they would describe it.
Right.
This is just our way. This is what we do. And it's where that richness of personal growth and development and expression is formatted within a closely held culture that supports people all the way from birth to death, and they would also say beyond and in between. And so it's just a normalized part of how they experience the world. And there's no such
Right.
thing as like a separate, oh, well, this is religion, or this is spirituality, or this is therapy, or this is healing. It's all the same thing. It's just, it's our way of being.
Right. Now, and it's just interesting. And I think it kind of leads back to the question that you asked her, is like she approached it from a therapeutic lens, stepping into like the psychedelic space. I was in the psychedelic space, also feeling on some level of what I was doing was some form of therapy, right? Just wasn't okay to use that term, right? Because it's like, well, you're not a therapist. You can't use therapy. What I'm witnessing is people evolve and shift and adjust. That seems pretty therapeutic to me. We've created community and kind of culture, essentially. Seems kind of therapeutic to me. But you're right. Like if you reflect back to the beginning, it wasn't like, oh, you just had that experience. Now we're going to integrate that experience, right? It was just all part of the community and culture and the experience of being where they were. Yeah. But anyhow, it's your time.
Yeah. So moving from a non-entheogenic therapeutic approach into what for many people is a new concept of, oh, let's work with entheogens. How is that transition for you? And I'm listening. I'm just letting Moxie back in.
Yeah. It was a really scary transition at first, especially given where we are at in the country, being in the Midwest.
Yeah.
And having a couple of people who were attempting to support what I was doing, but also kind of putting the fear in me that this could be like, a career suicide for lack of a better term. And so, I was like, okay, proceed with caution. How do we do this? So it was, really supportive on the way that it helped me to slow down enough in order to really figure out what's going to be the best bridge. How might I still be able to use the skills that I have, the practice that I have, and continue growing? So legally, ketamine is a substance that I'm able to work with in office and work with altered states of consciousness and a therapeutic framework. So that felt just about right, knowing that I can stay above board, be ethical, be legal, and still honor the impact from my own life as well, and wanting to do more and do things differently with people. So it was probably more difficult for me to have these experiences that were very expanding and very insightful, and then sit with clients and think like, wait, I'm supposed to do like cognitive behavioral therapy at this point? Like, that doesn't make any sense right now. This does not feel right for me. And I know that there are other options out there that are actually helping people to heal and to transform. And so I'm actually doing a disservice to my clients by not offering that. So for me, it was just non-negotiable. Once I knew, I couldn't unknow. And so then I wanted to get some additional training. I did a whole year-long training for psychedelic assisted therapy. I did 2 levels of internal family systems. So I'm able to have a practice where I do, about 50% of it with ketamine and non-ordinary states, and the other 50% with, just clients looking for an additional support with internal family systems or integration if they're using some additional substances or breath work outside of our sessions.
Yeah. So what I love, what I just heard in what you shared there, is what I like to point out around this idea of discovering our authentic self and our authentic inspiration and what we want to do with our lives. And that's what I'm hearing from you, is that once you were exposed to these other modalities, that it just became inauthentic of merely continuing with the talk therapy, with the behavioral therapy, with that kind of stuff. It's like, this is what I'm actually interested in. And of course, you had to make that happen. I always like to point this out as well, because people tend to, there's these spiritual ideas like, once I find my authentic self, like everything will just fall into place and it will come to me. But you got to go out and you got to do it. You still have to make choices. Like, your life is still your own. So now on the next lens that I want us to sift through or look through here, this dates back now to the very first interview and conversation I had with Kerby, was back when it was through the work of the Unchurch. And we got into Kerby's background about why he wanted to create an entheogenic church and his own spiritual and religious history and upbringing and the, the proverbial ontological shock of going through the medicine work, like, oh, maybe what I thought, maybe what I believe, maybe I don't adhere to that anymore because my worldview is actually shifting and changing. So I know through Kerby that you've had a bit of that yourself, Amber, but I have not had a chance to ever hear your story around that. So I'm very curious what you would be willing to share with all of us here.
Yeah. Oh man. Yeah. We're digging right down to the depths. I love it. Yeah, that was, really the outcome of my experience with 5-MeO DMT, being in a space where my intention going into working with that medicine was for spiritual understanding and for spiritual connection. And boy, did I get it. Just not at all in the way I thought I was going to get it. So that very dissonance was the precipice then for me to say, like, oh, along these same lines of like, once I've seen it, I can't like unsee it. And so it really challenged me to be able to kind of go back into my own layers of belief and who I thought I was and what I think about the nature of the world and life and death and what's right and what's wrong, because it was still fairly rigid for me at that time. So it was a huge renovation project. It was very scary at the beginning because I was just questioning everything in ways that I don't think I was ever really allowed to question, didn't allow myself to question, because it felt so threatening to poke holes in any beliefs that I had already incorporated into who I thought I was and how I thought the world actually worked. So it really brought me through a huge unwinding, and so grateful to have Kerby at my side for all of that, having done so much of his own work. And, during those times where I was just like, oh my gosh, like the whole house is being torn down, he would just keep saying, no, there's good bones here. It's not the whole thing. Not everything is being torn down, but yeah, we're ripping out a lot of walls. There's a lot going on here. I think that's where I'll stop with that. It was incredibly necessary, probably the hardest process I've ever been through in my life, still integrating so many aspects of it. And yet such a beautiful opportunity, because that's what really opened my eyes in a way that I really needed them to be open so that I could make all of these other shifts in my life. Because I was able to release things that I thought I was and move into more of who I am and care a little bit less, say no to things that I never thought I could say no to, and say yes to things that I never thought would be available to me.
But it was and again, well articulated, but it was a radical shift.
It was a radical shift.
Like who you are now versus that they're not even... It's completely different. Your perception and perspective on your previous beliefs, and you didn't share them, so I won't share them if you're trying not to share them. But like what you believed and kind of what you followed from a spiritual or religious perspective, that shift was massive, and it's still like trickling down in so many ways.
Yeah, it feels like, I think for me, it felt initially like a pendulum had to swing. Like I was all the way over here, the pendulum had to swing here, and I didn't have a lot of space for, what I'm seeing as true integration now, where it feels like I've got more space for some of these beliefs that I used to have, and they can still be in my system and kind of be in my realm, but in ways that feel a lot more spacious versus like, you have to believe this, you have to believe it this way. Yeah. And, just really stand firm on that. And now it feels like there's just more space. That's probably the best term. So, it really was an incredibly big shift.
Just think how it impacted our daughter, even like it's just such a huge trickle down.
Yes, but anyhow, it impacted family. It impacts my
everything.
Extended family. It impacts my relationships, the conversations I have with clients. Everything.
Yeah. Well, thank you guys for sharing that. Now, this is just kind of a unique opportunity because I've got both of you here and you're a couple. And this is something that you guys have probably seen as well, that when couples go through psychedelic experiences, not necessarily together, because they were facilitated alone, or for each person has their own session or their own turn. But everybody has their own unique original starting point that brings them into the work. And then they have their own process that they're going to go through. And it's not the same, right? You are different people. That Amber and Kerby are not the same person. They're coming with a different background. They're coming with different hangups and different things that they want to work on. And sometimes when couples are doing this, it naturally and inevitably goes into points of comparison of, oh, you're making more progress than me, or your experience was more blissful than mine, or you're having insights that I'm not having. And this is a question for both of you. What was that perception for you guys, and how did you navigate it and learn? I'm assuming you learned to really respect each person's process and your own process and not make it about comparisons. So I'm curious what that was like for you guys.
Want to go first?
I honestly don't remember comparing. I don't remember that being, I remember, especially early on, just having so much curiosity, especially as I was having my own experiences, being able to share with someone who already had like a framework and a language was super helpful. But then also to hear like, wow, when I sit with that medicine, this is what it's like for me. And then for him to share like, oh, well, it's like this for me. And it just kind of adds, I think an additional respect and perception around how everyone's going to be having different processes and different experiences with the medicines.
Yeah, I think for me, and I don't know if you remember this, but there was a very specific time, like even, well, and as you know, Martin, it's like, and again, that's why we have like this protocol. Like, even though you have like these insights, like you have this awareness of something, this intellectual understanding of it, it doesn't mean that you've embodied it, right? So it was still taking time for these certain aspects to embody. And I remember like still, having the church, working at the church, and I remember at the kitchen counter, I'm like, I think you're way better at this than me. I think you're more, I don't want to use the term spiritual, but I felt like she was more enlightened and aware and awake and conscious than I was. And I just felt like this huge peace come over to me. I'm like, I could absolutely step into the background. Right. And I was like, well, that's an interesting thought, because you had this other egoic thought of like, you're trying to do something. Yeah. Right. And now you're comfortable not doing anything and allowing her to do. And then like, how can I support her in doing this? So it never felt like comparison to me. It always felt, I've always said, like, if one zigs and the other zags, there's going to be a problem, right? We just seem to have like zig and zag together. I think part of it is because, like you said, I'm a verbal processor. So I'm constantly talking. Like, I had this thought last night about my identity, right? So it's just like, we were constantly integrating with each other, right? Like all the time. Like we have a sauna downstairs. We're sitting there for 20 minutes and I'm like, look around the room. Everything in here, we assigned meaning to it. Like if an alien popped in here, you wouldn't know that what a chair is, right? And then we're down the rabbit hole. So we've just been really lucky that we have taken time to just enjoy each other's space, respect each other's strengths.
Yeah.
Like I love like when she has these opportunities, or when I see her in class and I listen to her, I'm like, God, she's real good. And I really admire her and respect her. And I think that's really helped us, where it's not been like we both, we have egos, of course, but like neither of us are trying to be
better than, or it doesn't. Yeah. It feels, and I think it's always really felt like this is something we're trying to do together.
Yeah.
And I'm glad you brought up classes, because I think too, I mean, if anyone saw us at the beginning of our marriage, we couldn't even cook together.
Correct.
Like it wasn't like, I'm over there trying to micromanage and like, I can't believe you put that seasoning in there and how much. And it was just a disaster. So we had to do everything separate. And so sometimes I giggle to myself when we're on talks like this or teaching a class. And I think like, man, we couldn't even cook together. Like, this is so lovely that we've found a completely different flow. So yeah, I think us really seeing it as an us thing and not a you thing or a me thing has really taken us far.
That's awesome. And I love that you guys are able to share this comfortably here on the podcast. And also you are embodying and living and demonstrating to us like this sense of complementarity, that it's not a competition, but that especially when we're in partnership, there's a sense of complementarity, and that how do we work together? How do we act together? And how do we fulfill ourselves, again, for ourselves and then also with each other? That's the deep question of being in partnership. Yeah. So along those lines, and I think this is probably the last thing I want to ask about before we talk about the book. I just want to invite you, Amber, to share kind of what your role is with Mindscape. And I'll just preface it by, like when people ask me about Mindscape, I say, oh, well, Kerby's he's the director of the program, right? He's running the show over there. And, but you also you're teaching your own classes. You're involved in the facilitation class, the 5MEO facilitation class. So just, I'd love to hear more about what you've contributed and kind of what your own sort of pet projects are within Mindscape Institute. And for listeners, it's mindscapeinstitute.org, correct? Right?
Yes. Yeah. No, he is the brains behind the operation. So I get to flow into classes. We've taught classes together. But this is also, I mean, maybe we'll blame it on the work, which is wonderful. His capacity for admin skills now is phenomenal. I used to have to do all that. So I get overwhelmed with like, I think in the past, if he said, hey, do you want to do this together? I would have been like, yes, but I can't do all that work. And now the work is done and I get to show up and that's lovely. So I get to be a part of a lot of the courses. So I would say I'm an instructor, if I'm going to put a role on it, which is nice. And then under the umbrella of Mindscape, I also offer my own training for mental health professionals in ketamine-assisted therapy. It's a 10-week course with an experiential component. I just rolled that out this past year, and it's been so amazing to see my colleagues jump in and be in the space with me, because I've been hanging out here by myself for about 4 or 5 years. So I said, it's time. I need some other people. And so I can offer them what I know. And it's been phenomenal and I love it.
Yeah. Great. Anything you'd want to add to that, Kerby?
Again, our relationship is funny in so many ways, because I've always been the dreamer. Is that the right term?
Yep, you're the big idea guy.
Like, I've got an idea, and she's always like, oh no, here we go.
The break.
Like, I've got an idea. But to have something again that we can do together, and like, again, I don't get to see her in a therapy session, obviously. So I remember some of the first classes we taught, and I'm just like looking at her like with puppy dog eyes as she's sharing her experience. I'm like, God, she's really good. But I don't get to see that, right? I don't get to see that or hear that verbiage. And I remember a couple of students commenting on like, the way that you look at your wife when she speaks is like incredible. And I'm like, I'm truly in awe of the person that I see now. And so it's cool to witness his evolution, right? And it kind of, I'm sure it goes well. It's just interesting to be able to like, man, like it used to be not great, right? And to kind of watch it where it's like, I don't think it could be better, right? But we're still like working on these things. But to see her step into these roles, like, because I'm always like, years ago, I'm like, you should be teaching this. You're really good at it. And she's like, pump the brakes. I'll do it. But then she does it, and I've been in her classes, and they're amazing. And the way she does them is amazing. And the information that she has is incredible. So it's like we've been pretty good kind of support system for each other. But to see her step up and in versus, I think prior to the medicine, there would have been
so much anxiety. Yeah. It was just, there's no way I could have even gotten to that point. And so I think also having space to work at my own pace, because he was definitely pushing a lot before I knew I was ready. I was like, I'm not ready for that yet. That'll probably be a thing. But you hit it on the head. As soon as I said, okay, I'm ready, let's build it. And he built it, and it really allowed me to, show up even in my own course.
And then to go speak at conferences, you're like, I'm like, awesome. Because again, I'm very comfortable being background noise. I know people don't think that because I'm out there a lot, but I don't need to be out there. It's very cool to witness her be out there. I'm like, you should be out there more. Keep doing it. So it's been cool to witness. I feel like this is couples therapy.
It is. Lovely. Thanks, Martin.
Martin's going to send us an invoice.
Yeah. Well, you guys are doing a great job. I just want you to know that. So, yeah. Thanks for all of that. And Amber, I really appreciate all that you've shared here. And it's been delightful to use this opportunity to get to know you more and just to hear your own account. Cause I've known this guy for a few years now, and we've been through it all together, but it's great to get your input. So really, really enjoying this. I'm so glad that you guys both agreed to be part of this interview. So let's talk about this joint project then that you guys have put together. So to remind the listeners, I mentioned this earlier, but I'm going to say it again. This is the Embodiment Protocol, a practical guide to awakening with 5-MeO DMT. And this is by Stephan, Kerby, and Amber Kerby. And, we are recording this on November 19th. I sent you guys the files. That was like last week. Have you already hit launch? Have you hit publish? Is it out there yet, or?
I think we've sold like 3 books, but we haven't advertised it. So we published it, but sold 3 more books than I thought we would sell.
Yeah, well, it's actually just been a few days now, right? I mean, that was like maybe Thursday or Friday last week that I got to those materials. So for the listening audience, this is now available in both paperback and ebook over at Amazon. But let's talk about, where did this project get started? What was the germination? And then I want to hear all about it. But let's talk about like how it developed in the first place. Where did it come from?
Yeah, for me, again, it was, well, the very beginning of it, before I thought it was going to be a project. I guess the first experience was early on with the medicine. Again, I remember having this experience, and there was this thought that came to me of like, oh, that's what enlightenment is, right? And obviously anybody that's had this experience, I'm not claiming enlightenment, but I experienced what I would have called enlightenment from years of Buddhism, et cetera. I'm like, oh, that's what these monks are going to the monasteries for 30 years to kind of achieve. And it was like this light bulb moment of like, oh, that's what it is. So they gave me a reference point, right? This reference point of like, oh, there's a higher level of consciousness that I never experienced through years of meditation and breath work. I didn't have that reference point. Once I had that reference point, the next thought was, how can we help people get to this without the medicine ultimately, right? How do we use the medicine to get to a point where you don't need the medicine to get there, right? Yeah. And my process was kind of the opposite of what we're doing now. I'm like, well, you just need to take enough medicine, right? So this becomes like a very accessible piece. And, that wasn't the ideal protocol, right? But again, it was like, okay, there it is again, reference point. I'm like, you got to figure out how to find that without that. And then it was like, how do I do that? So that was kind of the beginning of like this curiosity, really, of how do I find that without the medicine? How can I sit in DMV and kind of expand into this more conscious state, find that witness? And I just became obsessed with that, which is the irony of enlightenment, right? Or awakening, chasing it. Right. Which I can look back now and say, that's kind of ironic and funny, but that's kind of the early stages, I think, of everybody's, evolution in it. But, I think in general, like in the psychedelic world, especially with something as powerful as like 5-MeO, what I've seen is like people will have these profound, beautiful, and sometimes overwhelming experiences, right? And they glimpse something real, like they glimpse, again, that awakening or liberation or enlightenment, whatever terms. I don't like the word enlightenment for some reason, but those terms, right? And just this something beyond their story, I guess is a good way of putting it, beyond their conditioning. And for a moment, like, you've served us, it's like we witness like this identity starts to soften. But what we've seen over and over is that experience itself doesn't change someone's life. Right. So again, when I said earlier, I'm like, how did this medicine experience actually help me? Like, how do I explain that to somebody? And, because again, I've seen people have these experiences and it doesn't necessarily change their life. Within a few weeks, they're back to this baseline personality, so to speak. To me, it's like it opens the door, but like the walking, the integration is like this embodiment that happens afterwards. So how do we help people embody that experience, not intellectualize it? Because I see that a lot. Like, oh, I was one with everything. I felt unconditional love, or that was enlightenment. Cool. You got to look at it, right? And then this fault, like I'm that thing now, right? I'm like,
yeah.
You got to touch it. You got a brief experience of it, but how do we embody that? And again, I think that's where a lot of people get stuck, right? These old patterns come back. The nervous system goes back into like this familiar set point. Mind tries to turn something sacred, which is another term I'm sitting with, like into a memory, a philosophy, right? Or even a performance. And like, I've said this before. It's like, you witness people, and he's Chad, the accountant, this big experience. And next thing you know, it's like still that he's just switched one identity for another identity. The new identity just happened to have more linen and beads and crystals, right? It's now like, I'm a spiritual person. I'm like, you just put yourself in a different prison, right? So you just went from one prison to the next prison. It's a good start. Like you're kind of moving in the direction. So it becomes this performance, right? And, people will say, well, why can't I hold on to what I felt? I knew it was true. So why can't I live it? Well, that's what the protocol is about, is like, what are some processes or what are some things that we can implement to take these experiences, over a period of time so they stick, right? Because another term I'm struggling with is like heal, right? Like heal feels like a linear process to me. Like you get a cut, it heals, right? Like, and then it's done. To me, it's more about like evolution or expanding. Or maybe there's better terms. Evolution isn't my favorite, but it's where I'm at right now with it, is like, how do we help people evolve? Because that's an ongoing process, right? And I'm still in that process. I can embody certain aspects of it, but and you could probably speak to this better than me. Once you start thinking you're breaking through layers of the ego and you're like, yeah, I got it figured out. You found out it just got more clever and more slick. And you're like, damn it, got me again, right? So the amount of times that's happened to me has kind of led me to the point of like, this is a forever game. And I'm glad it's a forever game. It's a fun game. But how do we get other people into it versus these large mystical experiences that could be fleeting?
Yeah. Anything you'd want to add or expand on there, Amber?
Yeah, I think what comes up for me is just the idea that this protocol it's a practice,
yes,
right? Like embodying and integrating, like ing. It is going to be a thing that is happening.
Yeah.
And so we're going to be practicing this. It becomes part of a lifestyle, part of a practice, building your awareness, remaining present, which I think is tricky for so many of us, because we're looking for like the answer. We're looking for the pill that's going to solve it all. And it turns out what's actually going to solve it is this evolution, this changing, this perpetual shifting.
Yeah. So if I could just use something that was mentioned earlier. So Kerby, you had talked about how you were kind of stuck in that perpetual flight or fight response based on your own traumatic experiences. And I think that serves as like a good example that you mentioned that you were able to actually sit with and be present with the idea of, is there anything threatening me right now? No. Okay, so maybe I don't need to engage this preset pattern. And so I think I always love using examples whenever they're available, that because it can be confusing if somebody says, well, what do you mean just like stay present? Like, what does that mean? And this is what we mean, right? That when you have some kind of nervous system response that is incongruous with what's actually happening to you in the moment, that's a dysfunctional pattern. And it's not to be judgmental. It's just to identify that's dysfunctional because there's nothing threatening you right now. You don't need to have your armor up. And so learning that And going through that practice, as you guys have been emphasizing, that's how we learn to, okay, I can let down the armor and it's okay. And maybe it's even better than okay. Maybe it's really good. But then the armor is going to come back, right? So then we have to learn, okay, let it down again. And then one of the ways we do that is by being mindful of the present moment and coming back to what's actually happening. And this is where I love what you were saying, Kerby, about how I think in my book, In Theogenic Liberation, it might be somewhere in there where I wrote, I could be kind of harsh sometimes in my writing style, where I think I basically said, like, I don't care how many enlightenment experiences you think you've had or you've had. If you're not working on grounding this into your everyday lived reality, who cares? If you've had 1 or 1,000, doesn't really matter, because, and I'm going to support your language, that I like to say an enlightenment experience is not the same thing as being enlightened, however we want to characterize that. It just means you had an experience that maybe gave you a new baseline for, like, oh, this is what's possible. And just to echo what you shared, that this is a common experience with 5-MeO-DMT. Lots of people go through it where they say, like, yeah, I was fully enlightened, but then the ego comes back and, like, where to go? Where to go? How do I find it again? And merely chasing after more and bigger experiences, as you were saying, Kerby, that's actually not the process. That's just chasing.
Right.
Yeah.
Right. And it was interesting because I got to witness it in Amber, right? Like, I'd done, by the time you did it, probably 100 experiences already under my belt, right? Like full blown experiences. And I've done a lot, right? I've done a lot. She's done it twice, right? And I always say, like, that doesn't seem fair, right? Like, she's like more enlightened or awake or conscious than I'll ever be. And I was like, she's only done it twice. So to witness that also changed my perspective on not just the medicine work, but even like training, right? Like, there's some trainings out there that, we've got students in our classes that got rejected from other trainings because they didn't have 20 full experiences. I'm like, I understand that idea. I used to have that idea because that's how I was trained. I would sit with this person than probably anybody that went through your class.
Yeah.
So this seems like a limiting belief, right? And I only felt that because I witnessed it, right? And how did that happen? Again, because we were constantly integrating the experience.
And that idea too. I mean, we built a lot of it on that initial idea of how do we maintain this? How do we still stay connected to what we're experiencing, but without the medicine? And so really digging into some of those practices and tuning into the fact that, like, what we're experiencing can still be traced back. Like, I can still anchor in, I can lay a couple breadcrumbs so that I know how to get back to certain places. And then with practice, I really can drop back into a lot of that spaciousness that we're experiencing that kind of leads to that enlightenment and that ability to really know more about who I am and who I'm not, and what's really threatening and what's actually happening in this present moment.
Yeah. And I think even going back to a question you asked earlier, like, what was kind of the starting point? I remember early on having this deep fear of the experience going away, right? Like, a few days after it, I felt I'm like, I'm so scared that this is going to go away. I'm like, how do I maintain this? And my thought then was like, just go do the medicine again, right? I'll go back and do the medicine.
Yeah.
And then it was like, again, this realization, like, there's got to be a better system. And it's like any habit, right? And that's what the thought was, like, any habit is, okay, how do we, and that's a baseline for the protocol, right? Is if you're, and we'll talk about, because we're in complete agreement. There's a huge benefit to the full experience, right? So, and I want to make that clear for anybody listening too. I'm not saying the full experience or the stepwise protocol that we've been using for years is wrong or flawed. I'm not saying this is a replacement. I'm saying this is an alternative.
Yeah.
Like, we talk about tradition. This is medicine's 40 years old and the current use of it. Part of awakening, I think, is questioning all your thoughts and beliefs about yourself. But for me, it's also been the words that we use, the way that we show up, kind of the space that we're in, like question everything, not from the perspective that it needs to be changed, but like, is there a different way? Why wouldn't we do that? So we get a little pushback because people are like, well, this is the way we've always done it. Beautiful. You can keep doing that. We're just saying, is there an alternative, maybe a slower route that maybe be suitable for other people? And then hopefully people will take this same idea and evolve it, right? Like, oh, that's like where you're going with that, but maybe we can do beautiful. Let's evolve with this medicine. But it was that, right? Like, to me, the full experience for me, why I was addicted is a bad term. You can't be addicted to this. Yeah, drawn to, because it's like, it's horrifying. But drawn to was because it forced me into this more conscious state, right? It forced it because I couldn't surrender into it. But the more I worked with it, the more I realized, wow, I'm actually getting more benefit from these medium or medium high experiences because I am in my kind of baseline personality. I get a little altered, but then I have to like truly surrender into that more conscious state. And then there's a retraction. Like, oh my God, you did it. Or like the music or the people, whatever. Retraction. You're like, let's settle the nervous system. Let's breathe. Expansion. You did it again. Retraction, right? So you're training yourself to go from your baseline to this more conscious state. That to me makes more sense in the way that we are all function on a day-to-day basis. You're sitting in traffic. Okay. Can you catch yourself and expand and find that witness or that more conscious aspect of yourself? I can't be forced into it in traffic, right? So how do you train people to find it, right? And it's like, first it's a little breadcrumb, and then it becomes like a little deer trail, then a dirt trail, then a paved trail. Like it gets easier and easier is what I found to now I can take a breath and expand it in this more conscious state. It didn't happen because I took the medicine. It happened, the medicine, I don't like to use this protocol works without the medicine. And there's other protocols very similar. It's just like, hey, here's how we can use the medicine to speed this up because you're going to have that expansive feeling. Let's remember it and let's keep finding it. Let's keep finding it so you could find it outside the medicine. So.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, there's a couple things I'd like to comment on there, and then I want to get into sort of the nitty gritty of the protocol itself. One is that I think the fact that you guys have been going through this process together, I think really contributes to be able to produce something like this because, when we're just doing medicine work on our own and we're just living our own lives, that we might think like, yeah, I've got it all figured out. Like it's all working. But, like the old adage is, oh, you think you're enlightened? Well, then go home and see your family, right? But the fact that you guys are in a committed relationship together, that you're going through this growth together, and that question of how do we make it meaningful in our everyday lives, that becomes prioritized there for somebody who's, on a solo path, a solo trajectory. They might not have those same kind of concerns and priorities. So I think that helps this system grow. And I think also the fact that you guys were running the unchurch and serving a largely local community, and that this is kind of something that I commented on the foreword that I wrote for you guys' book, is that so much 5-MeO facilitation has been done in the context of, I need to travel somewhere, I need to take time off of work, and because there has not been a lot of access, right?
Yes.
So that then incentivizes, let's make the most out of the week or 2 days or however long it is that I have. So that prioritizes, let's go big, and let's go big really quickly. Versus if we have easy access, like if we could go to the local church or the local therapist and do a session every week or something like that, where it's not a question of, I've got to arrange all these schedules, I've got to fly across the world, I've really got to make the most of it. It's like, oh, I can take my time. So I think that
right.
The context in which you guys have been doing this work, I think naturally lends itself to these kinds of questions and this kind of approach. So going back to, again, that authenticity thing, like this feels really authentic for where you guys have developed your views.
I think with the accessibility of this medicine too, and again, I just want to be very cautious. As often as I've done this medicine, I still now, even on like medium doses, don't do it alone. right? So I may be overly cautious. That's just who I am by nature. I feel better just having her in my space. But there's a lot more safety with like smaller, medium doses than somebody having a full experience, right? So I think there's an opportunity there for, and that's why we created the protocol in the book. It's for therapists, facilitators, and journeymen, right? Like people, because I think people should be able to have these experiences if done safely. So how do we do it safely? How do we provide access for that? And then what type of specific protocol can we use to make that accessible to people for exactly the reasons that you mentioned? And again, I love the term you used on a previous podcast. I think it was Steve Rios. Was that the gentleman that you interviewed?
From Unfold.
Yeah. And you used, energetic recalibration, which I really like that term, right? But again, it's like, and you've witnessed this, I'm sure you've witnessed this. It's like this energetic recalibration doesn't like automatically recondition the personality permanently, right? It's like the habits, the survival patterns, the underlying identity structure, right? The nervous system is always going to try to return to whatever baseline is familiar, even if the energetic system was like recalibrated. So again, I want to say that because I do see these large experiences as extremely beneficial. I guess the line that we use with folks, yes, does it have to happen today? Now, if you're traveling, maybe it does have to happen today. But if you have access, it's like let's build some strength in our nervous system or some flexibility in our nervous system. Let's get used to this experience, right? Because if you have the full experience and you're completely offline, well, when you come back online, where are you at? Well, you're in a high experience and you're shifting to a medium. So the more you can learn to navigate in that space and have very specific practices that you're doing in that space, right? When you do come back online from this large experience, you're in familiar territory. So the nervous system is like, oh, I've been here before multiple times. I'm comfortable. Versus somebody that just walks into a place, has this huge experience. It's this huge experience on top of a deep, non-ordinary state of consciousness, right? And they're navigating both those. And I think what's missing out is like, they're not able to really get a lot of as much benefit as they could from that experience. They've had the energetic experience, which is great. But if there's no new scaffolding to fall on, or the identity is the same, that experience to me is going to fade. So again, I don't want to minimize that large experience. Again, it's to us, it's like, does it have to happen today, or can we build up to it and then step into that and then get that energetic recalibration that I do think is important? But now it's a new identity or a new, more conscious aspect of yourself that's able to then drive that new car.
Yeah. It's really building like a new familiar, right? Like for some reason, maybe it's because we're having some car challenges. Vehicles, and I'm like, yeah, you can take your vehicle in for this big overhaul and, the tires are realigned. Great. But if you keep taking that vehicle down the same road and your only option is to just keep taking it in the shop for some big overhaul, like that gets pretty hard on the vehicle and kind of expensive. So is there a way that we can also kind of create this different path? So if we know that road is full of potholes and it's going to wreck your vehicle, don't keep taking it because it's familiar. Let's also be able to use this space to kind of get a feel for some of the other routes that we can be taking, take advantage of that neuroplasticity, new habits, so that it's a little bit easier on this poor little vehicle I've got going on.
Yeah, and I think that is a great visual metaphor. I just want to say that. I love that.
Right. And I think, just super brief, it sets different expectations, right? If somebody's working with a protocol, I'm like, here's what it looks like over the next so many months. And I think that's important because, again, I think often in the space, it's oversold, underdelivered. The experience is always, is what it is, but usually a very big and beautiful experience, right? But again, if it's fading, it feels like fruits dying on the vine. It's kind of one of the analogies I used in the book. And that's concerning too, right? Because what we see is as these folks, and you've probably integrated that they went in, and because it didn't do what they thought it would do, that maybe they did something wrong, or I did it wrong, or whatever terms are being struck. And it's like, no, that's actually how it really works, right? You get a glimpse of these things. You get a moment. You're peeking through the window of it, so to speak, or the door. You haven't walked in and embodied it yet. So what are we going to do for that?
Yeah. So one of the alternate titles that I know that you've used for this is the 6-month protocol. So the book itself, to remind the listeners, is the Embodiment Protocol, a practical guide to awakening with 5-MeO DMT. But yeah, you also like to use this phrase of, it's the 6-month protocol. So let's get in a bit to the nuts and bolts of like what transpires over the course of this 6 month and this idea that we're not starting from the large dose. We're gradually working up to it as we'll go back to the pothole metaphor, that we're not just going to give you a big dose and then say, okay, go drive over all of the potholes again, and we'll see you back for another big dose once you've gone out of alignment and you've popped all your tires. But I'm going to start learning how to maybe not drive over the potholes and maybe even take a completely different path of a well-paved road that is outside of my normal identity, so I might be really uncomfortable, unfamiliar with it. But then eventually I'm going to get to that. The big reveal at the end where it just goes, boop, guess what? It's all love, and it's always been love all along, and that's what you've always been. So, go have fun. But you're working up to that. You're not starting there.
Yeah, I'll just touch it briefly, then I'll let you feel free to hop in. Originally it was like, well, this is the 6-month protocol. So we built the protocol out for 6 months. But then also this recognition that, again, everybody's in a different space, right? Everybody's in a different timeline for their evolution. If I'm talking to somebody and they have no understanding of what non-duality is, or consciousness, or breath, or meditation, it may take longer, right? Or they could pick it up faster. So what we wanted to do is create more of a framework that, again, a therapist could use, and whatever she uses, IFS, I use acceptance and commitment therapy. Can they use their own intervention and make this work? Beautiful. So let's kind of create this model, but also give it plenty of room to breathe and be adjusted. So here's 6 months of it. This may be 3 months with somebody. It may be 4 months with somebody. You have to, again, by working with this person, you'll have a better idea of how it operates. So we shifted that language, because it's going to be different for everybody. And even the practices, right? Amber's going to do IFS. I don't know if IFS, so creating a protocol specifically for IFS would seem silly. I want it more accessible to, again, therapists or facilitators or just the journeyman. So what other frameworks can you use? So we wanted to make it a little bit more flexible in that sense. And again, people change and shift and evolve at different places.
Yeah.
But like in summary of it, we try to blend. The goal obviously is live transformation rather than like this sudden, transformation. So like daily awareness practices, some of my favorite, right? Short, repeated awareness sessions throughout the day. Like one of my favorite is like the 1-minute meditation, which I do. An alarm goes off, I stop. I'm taking that minute in to do like a 4-7-8 breathing or a mantra, right? And again, even before you eat a meal, like the client that I was working with, who again didn't do 5-MeO. We've got folks that are taking psilocybin and doing this, taking ketamine and doing this. So it's again, we wanted this loose framework, but also very specific with the goal of helping people become more conscious, more aware. So because I think ultimately that trickles down to like the depression and the anxiety and all those things. Let's become more aware. Mm-hmm. So even small things like the gentleman I was talking to yesterday, the day before, I was like, when was the last time you sat and ate a meal and actually tasted the food, right? Like, can you just be present right here and taste it, right? Taste the food. Or sit in the shower, feel the water on your body, or take a minute and like step into this more aware aspect of yourself. Anything to kind of disrupt this. The autopilot. Yeah. Yes. So daily practices to kind of constantly disrupt this autopilot and step into this more witnessing aspect of yourself. Weekly, again, I don't like integration is becoming a loosey-goosey term now. I'm an integration specialist. but like, integration focus, emotional regulation, identity deconstruction.
Yeah. What's the intention really? Like what's the client's goal? What's the person's goal? What is it that they're actually trying to work with? Emotion regulation, identity, relationships, all of that.
Yeah. So it could include basic, like very specific journal prompts for them specifically. And we give a number of those. Anterior cingulate cortex. I always get that one wrong. The AMCC nervous system training, which again, breath work, cold showers. Even nowadays, it's easier. It's like, I want you to leave your phone in the room every time you go to the bathroom, right? Like anything to make you uncomfortable, right? Because it starts rewiring the way the brain operates. So they're just these very specific practices. And then again, we slide in, depending on the participant, these monthly medicine practices where we can do 4 or 5 rounds even sometimes, right? And then have them expand into this space. Okay, there it is. So now when you do your meditation practice, can we find that space again? Again, you got that reference point. Let's keep locating that reference point over and over and over. So again, it's just repetitious consciousness and awareness expansioning practices that could go 6 months, it could go a year. But what we're seeing is usually, we notice results almost immediately, right? So we have some baseline. We're intellectually giving them the information, like, yeah, you're one with everything, all the non-dual teachings. But we know it's like this will make more sense in a couple weeks, right? Then they have the experience, but now that experience makes more sense. They're like, oh, that's what beautiful. Step 1. Now let's embody that. And so it's just this repetitious process. That's again has been extremely effective. It was effective for me, and we're finding it again to be extremely effective for the people that are going through it.
Yeah. Amber, anything you'd want to expand on there or add?
I think that's perfect. I'm over here like doing like therapist speak in my head too. So for any of my clinical listeners, so much of it has to do with mindfulness interventions, really helping people to stay more present. And then the nervous system work has a lot to do with expanding windows of tolerance. How do we really titrate discomfort? Because change is really uncomfortable, but yet everybody's coming to us wanting these big changes. Our best bet really is to titrate that and help people to maybe avoid the potholes first. And then perhaps it is take an entirely different path, which is going to be even more uncomfortable. So really helping people to feel more empowered and more equipped to make these kinds of changes that they're coming in saying they want.
Yeah.
Yeah. So
much better than what
Amber, the one who's been established as a therapist longer than Kerby. I know, Kerby, you've been going back to school, and man, I'll just tell you, like, that's like my nightmare.
Literally,
like sometimes,
mine too.
Sometimes I have dreams where I'm back in school, and it's like, what the fuck am I doing here? Like, I don't want to take tests. Like, I don't want to do this. But I know you've been going back to school, officially for your therapist license. But from more a longer standing background within the therapy realm, Amber, how can you imagine therapists maybe who are not acclimated around the use of psychedelics? Would they find this accessible? Is it speaking that language? Is it within that modality?
Yeah, it's got I think enough of it in there where I think therapists will be able to read it and understand what the intention is. And then if it's something that they want to be able to integrate into whatever model they're already practicing with, they'll be able to do that with enough ease. And also if it's something new, I think a lot of therapists are coming from some of the top-down approaches where it's more cognitive based, and we're doing more bottom-up work. We're doing more somatic, and really embodiment itself is less top-down.
Yeah.
And so this will also give these practical ways. If it's something new and they're not sure how it might fit, well, I'll just go ahead and use this exercise then. And see how that works. And if it's something they want to tailor, they can. And if it seems to, be a great intro, then wonderful. Please use it.
Yeah. And I think just, and Martin, again, you can speak to this. We're seeing more and more licensed therapists stepping into the psychedelic space, Absolutely. Right? In our classes alone, I think the last class was 35% therapists, right? But they're in this unique position. They're not just interested in breakthrough experiences. So kind of the traditional system isn't as appealing to them. And for a multitude of reasons, right? They've got more liability. They're responsible for client safety, long-term stability, ethical care, right? And many of them are risking their license to do this, right? So they're looking for a model that's not only effective, but safe, regulated to some degree, and sustainable, right? And clinically sound. So that was an important piece of this, is like, how do we create something that would, I don't use the term appeal to therapists, because we're not trying to sell them it, but that they have access to, versus, again, the traditional training or the traditional stepwise model that we're seeing now. And so I think it's actually incredibly valuable for therapists, right? Less risk of destabilization. And they're already used to this. I'm meeting people weekly, right? We're already having, now you have a very specific, dynamic of the meeting or direction of the meetings and the work. And I think that it's going to appeal to them probably the most.
Yeah. I mean, and I think it's really,
it can be used without the medicine. So I think that, is equally as important. So if it's someone who's working with a client who's engaging in these practices outside of their office, because maybe they don't want to take the legal risk, wonderful.
Right.
We still have this framework of embodiment to work with.
Yeah. And what I like is that it really emphasizes this idea of, we're working on a process and we're providing tools and practices and methodologies for doing so. And I think this also is kind of a reflection of your own journey in some respects, Kerby, that I know that for you, you kind of started out more on the ceremonial side, and that, that's at Mindscape, that's not really something that we teach, and we don't disparage it. If people want to be ceremonial, they can be ceremonial. But I think that in some trainings that I've seen, it goes a bit overboard in the ceremonial with the idea of, well, the more ceremony we make and the more bells and whistles and feathers and crystals we have, then the better it is. But for me, that's all contextual. It's like, well, that's all an environmental issue, but it's not really the nuts and bolts of how do we work with it? What are we doing? And especially that question of, how is it landing outside of the ceremony, outside of the session, outside of the therapist's office? How are we making this meaningful? And I think it's particularly a potent question right now. Like, as we know that, there's these 5-MeO nasal sprays that are potentially coming online. They're already being sold, even though we have not entered into legal 5-MeO DMT therapy yet. I've already seen people marketing these nasal sprays and making them accessible. And this is something they can do it at home. Like, here I am. And so this is a guidebook for people who maybe get access that way, but it's coming, right? This 5-MeO DMT therapy, use of this as a medicine to treat depression, trauma, anxiety, it's coming. And so this is almost like a preemptive tool. It's like, okay, well, a guidebook is already here for you. So I think it's very timely in that sense.
Yeah, and it's funny because the nasal spray has been a conversation in one of our group chats, but and there's a group out there, I won't mention them, but they're silomethoxin, the old that group. Again, they have low dose pens now that are available. Because again, I think ultimately, and we've had this conversation, it's like, there's plenty of pipe lighters out there. There's plenty of people, if you want to show up, they'll load the pipe, give you a big experience, and then you kind of go home. And then maybe you talk to integration specialist, that took their weekend training, right? That's like, let's make sense of the experience, which is why I think you're probably the best 5-MeO integration, not just teacher, but, practitioner. Is like, this isn't the same. We're not trying to like make meaning of like this thing that there's no visualization. There's nothing to really grab on and to try like making sense of. It's you view it more of an energetic experience, where I agree with it. And so to us, it's also not traditional integration. It literally is, like you said, a practice. Like, how do we not just have this experience and then try to make sense of it and call it a day? Mm-hmm. It's like, how do we embody the experience that we just had, this non-dual, this interconnected with everything, right? Like all of these deep and meaningful life altering experiences. Like, how do we live from that? Like, how do we walk through life that way? Mm-hmm. And, you know, it's like, to me, it's like we were actually just sharing this thought today because I had a friend like, oh, you need to read this book on non-duality. I'm like, I'm kind of in a space where I'm not really interested in more information. I chased information for years. When I have all the information, then I'll be more awakened, right? It's like, no. It's less information. I've got all the tools I need. Be present, experience this reality one moment at a time, and realize that we are interconnected. So interact with humans that way and experience this reality. That it's the simplification. Everything outside of that to me is beliefs that we could have conversations about: karma, past lives. Fine. Let's have those belief conversations. These are the truths. So how do you allow people or help people live that truth? And again, just experiential. It changed my life, and it changed our marriage. It changed how we interact with our daughter, our son, right? Like, and I want that for people. I don't want them to just have big experiences. I want those experiences to be meaningful. So how do we do this in a way that's accessible to more people? And where it actually will shift the way that they're living in this reality.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. Well, that feels like a pretty good place to wrap it up. And I'm just looking at the time, and I know you guys are a couple hours ahead of me, and I want to give you permission to go have a good time in the kitchen and do some mutual cooking if that's what's on the menu for tonight. But just thank you both very much for your time today and for your effort in putting this project together. And special thanks to you, Amber, for being so forthcoming and sharing of your own experience and perspective and being a willing participant here on the podcast. It's just been an absolute pleasure to have you here, and Kerby, you as well, to have you guys here together. I think it's very illustrative of what a harmonious couple that is going through the process together, what is possible. And it's been very nice to give you the opportunity to model that for others in your sharings and exchanges here today.
Thank you for having us. And thank you, as always, for all the support. It means a lot to both of us. So thank you.
Thank you, Martin.